In fact, let's take a look at some of the key results that have stemmed from Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the UAE, because this will help you understand and give you a perspective of how this visit or 4-hour visit of the Prime Minister has actually panned out to be, and what are the big ticket announcements or MOUs that have been in fact made. So let's look at the biggest announcement yet from the Prime Minister's trip to the UAE, agreement on framework for the strategic defence partnership between India and the UAE. So obviously we are looking at cooperation in the field of defence. Remember that F-16s had also escorted the Prime Minister's plane when it entered the UAE airspace, and given the geopolitical scenarios currently in West Asia, a strategic partnership with the UAE will go a long way for India as well. So this is of utmost importance. Now let's look at the return, big ticket return number 2, MOU on strategic petroleum reserves. Now remember that India has around 74 days of strategic petroleum reserves if we include the government reserves and the oil marketing companies reserves as well in total, and we have around 64% of that 74 days. So clearly India wants to expand that if the country does face an energy crisis. Like right now, because of the West Asia crisis, we've been seeing a lot of fuel disruptions. So India will want to cushion itself from the global impacts, and this strategic petroleum reserves help us do that. So India is looking at an MOU with the UAE in that front. We are looking at building more strategic reserves in Odisha and in Karnataka, and that's where this MOU will actually factor in. Let's look at the next return where we have an agreement on supplies of liquefied petroleum gas. So over the West Asia crisis, India had various oil tankers and LPG tankers that were in fact stranded in the Strait of Hormuz, and we were seeing one ship making its way across the Strait of Hormuz through agreements with Iran during this time, and we had seen the LPG, commercial LPG see some sort of a crisis. The prices has increased over the past 2 months, and India would like to cushion that. Currently UAE is still the largest supplier of the LPG to India, which is around 40%. They will look to boost that as well. So we are looking at agreement on supplies of LPG as well. Let's look at the next big return for India in this 4-hour journey that the Prime Minister trip that the Prime Minister made to the UAE, where we are seeing a MOU on setting up ship repair cluster at Wadi Nar. Now remember that ship infrastructure, shipbuilding is something that India is looking forward to expand at, and we are looking at Atmanirbharta and also indigenous capability development in this sector, and that's where this MOU in fact will play a major role. So in Wadi Nar we are looking at a ship repair cluster that will be built. Let's look at the next return for India, which is investment worth rupees 5 billion US dollars announced in Indian infrastructure and RBL Bank and Samman Capital. So 5 billion US dollars worth of investments in infrastructure. We are looking at job creations as well. We are looking at investment in RBL Bank and Samman Capital. So this is a big ticket investment that is in fact coming in from the UAE after this entire trip, very brief trip that the Prime Minister has made to the UAE. So clearly these are some of the big returns that India has been able to bank after this brief visit by the Prime Minister. Let me rope in Shruti Das Gupta for these when we're talking about these big ticket announcements that have been made. Ma'am, you obviously mentioned that these are something that were being talked about. We were looking to secure our energy field and energy sector. That's what we have done. But defense is also something that is of vital importance given the West Asia crisis, given the Ukraine-Russia war, and given that US is looking leaning towards China more. We have Trump currently in Beijing, and this comes at a vital importance then.
And this is where we have to walk that tightrope you were mentioning. While we have a strategic defense partnership and comprehensive economic partnership and the other versions of whatever partnership we end up signing with UAE, we need to ensure that we can have an expedited sale of equipment if they need it. We can have a large amount of defense cooperation in development, AI, energy sectors, or any other place. But we should refrain from actually going into a mutual defense pact like the one that Saudi and Pakistan have, where it would put our army, our personnel directly in confrontation for the honor of UAE. Now, that is the tightrope, that is a hard line that we must not cross. And I think we've managed to do so. We've ensured and assured that we will provide the equipment, probably even training of UAE's troops themselves to ensure, or any other troops that would be functioning on these equipment, so that they can gain a leverage in terms of security in the Gulf region, which continues to be volatile in terms of military engagement as such. So that is the defense pact comes very, very important there. Now, of course, when you mentioned Trump being in China, it seemed it has been fun watching him squirm and be very polite and a very different version of his obnoxious self. And that shows us exactly how he has dumped Taiwan in this entire conversation. We've seen how US has reported about Taiwan, saying that there has been no mention of it, while Xi Jinping himself and in his conversation, as well as other reports from that region, are saying that they were warned that Taiwan is our bottom line and let's not touch it. So it seems that the US has dumped Taiwan, and UAE should also then UAE and in fact other Gulf nations should also watch out for being dumped in the same manner, because ultimately each one is for themselves, and that is what USA is telling. Iran is telling Gulf nations, telling other defense cooperations across the world, as a declining power, they might find themselves trying to safeguard their own interests before their partners. And in such a place where India puts forth its own defense cooperation, it puts out its own energy in response for energy cooperation with UAE as well as a tech cooperation, it helps balance out both economies. We mentioned in the past panels that we've sat on this channel itself that UAE is looking to almost double its trade with India from 100 billion to 200 billion in the next 6 years. That can be not just on the basis of petroleum, it can be based on other sectors as well. So a multi-sector engagement is important, while energy stays the most critical point of the meeting. And the very cause of PM Modi's 4-5 hour visit to UAE was to take advantage of UAE's exit from OPEC. It is not the only deal that we are looking at. We're also looking to de-dollarize. We've probably signed an MOU too, which is not probably as popularly put out. We would be looking for local currency settlement or whatever trade that is happening, so that there is not as much as a pressure on the Indian rupee, as we've seen it continue to fall. Even I think today it has fallen. So we've seen it continue to fall against the dollar. So to de-dollarize, disengage from keeping dollar as a reserve currency and use it for trade with UAE. So that local currency settlement is also important for India. So there is a multi-sector engagement that has happened, probably not just because he visited today. These, as you have mentioned before, have been in the works, have been in the pipeline for a very long time. There have been understandings, there have been cooperations at different levels of administration for this. But to use this opportunity to sign it out, it puts out it puts away the panic that the public might be feeling with the 3% hike in fuel prices across India today. So it shows that the government understands that it needs to do certain steps to ensure that panic doesn't set in, that reserves are maintained, the energy shock does not lead to a collapse of a growing manufacturing hub that India is trying to project itself as. So there are a large number of factors that have played into this particular signing. US, China, UAE, India, it has been a geopolitical chess game that we are all playing, and this was our very effective move to counter any actions by US, China, Iran that could have led to a further disaster towards Indian economy.
Absolutely. Okay. So, I'll request Shruti Das Gupta to in fact stay on with us. I thank you, Mr. Srivastav, to in fact give us your valuable perspective on this issue. We are moving on to some other stories for the time being as US-Iran tensions continue to simmer. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov on Friday has said that India can play the role of long-term mediator during his visit to Delhi for the foreign ministers' BRICS meeting. Now, while talking to the media, he said, and I quote here, Pakistan is helping establish dialogues between the US and Iran to resolve urgent problems. If they seek a long-term mediator, this role could be played by India, considering its vast diplomatic experience. So, this is a big statement in fact that is coming in from the Russian foreign minister and they have in fact backed India as a long-term mediator who has a vast history of diplomatic experience. All right, with that we will slip into a short commercial, but we will be right back. Stay on.